Good afternoon. My name is Montreal Whitaker again, coming to you to speak about what I took from the observation video that you just saw. Just some observations and things that I was able to receive from the class. I really enjoyed the class and what I saw took place on today. This class was a ICBA class, Introduction to Computer Business Applications class, which is comprised of 8th grade students, boys and girls, facilitated by one of our senior teachers on the campus in which I work. This class is facilitated using a program called Class Dojo. It's a class system where the teacher uses it to recognize students. They use it as a system of acknowledgement, also where they can input comments, concerns, things of that nature. And so the classroom setting is really facilitated through the use of technology, as you can see. The teacher, when I came in, class had already started, and the teacher was engaged in a discussion with students regarding aspects in regards to living, day-to-day living. When I came in, they were talking about the cost of living, and she was kind of giving them a comparison between the cost of living here in the South versus the cost of living on the East Coast as well as on the West Coast. And she was trying to explain to them the importance of education and why it's so important for them to understand how to use these various business applications, because they would need these things not only in high school, but if they decide to go to college, they would need these things, as well as if they began to work in the real world setting. Many places of employment, they would be responsible for, if not creating these documents, they would at least need to know how to understand these type of documents. And so she took this component of the lesson, and she took this section of the lesson as an opportunity to tie real world learning experiences into the concept of what it is that she wanted them to learn. In doing this, she moved on from dealing with the cost of living aspect, which I really believe it was something that she used to catch their attention, to tie the lesson into what was going on in the actual lesson in regards to that lesson and what real world learning looks like. This class, it moved from that point, and it began to revolve around the necessity of education and how we relate that necessity of education to real world experiences. She wanted them to know that you have to have a solid education to be able to really make an honest living in today's society. And so the students were actively engaged, raising their hands to be recognized. They had comments and questions about her past work experience and how she was able to take education and actually implement it into what it is that she's done in the past as well as what she does now. She referenced when she used to work in the business sector, private sector, and how things that she learned in school was so important when she got to that private sector, real world experience. And this she even tied into how now as a teacher, she's able to use some of those same applications and learnings in her employment now. The teacher, she facilitated a conversation, giving input and receiving comments from students. I really enjoyed the interaction between teacher and student. It was a very laid back environment, yet it was still very structured. And I think when a teacher can create a climate where the student is not ashamed to ask questions, where the student is still learning, where where the student is fostering ideas. I believe that by this teacher being able to create that kind of environment, it really promotes learning and it pushes the learner to want to receive more of the information that she has. I assume that at the beginning of class that the standards and objectives were addressed, but during the middle of the lesson, she still touched on the standards and objectives that the class is centered around and that this lesson is centered around. And by doing that, that was a way for her to transition the lesson from the open discussion to a more centralized idea of what the lesson was really revolved around. As I looked around the room, I saw that the classroom was filled with different learning material on the walls. Every space of the class is filled with learning. And since this is a computer business application class, she has a lot of materials pertaining to parts of the computer and the keyboard and computer safety, and even how you can apply the use of computers to everyday learning. And so this classroom is really conducive, and it's really set up where a student has nothing but opportunities to learn. After she kind of touched on the standards and objectives and addressed those to really reiterate what those were dealing with, the discussion shifted to speaking about supply and demand, excuse me, and why businesses operate the way they do. They went to a brief discussion talking about Nike and tennis shoes, and she talked about the cost of making shoes in relation to the cost that we pay for shoes. And she took something that kids love, which is tennis shoes, and she really applied it to how business operates. She said that because there's such a high demand, therefore they can charge so much for the supply. And she gave them a term from the business world, supply and demand. As the demand is greater, the more the company can actually charge for those items. And so she told them that even in this supply and demand component, there's still business applications that go into the creation of that supply and demand. And so every real world, real life scenario that she gave, she was able to tie that into what the lesson dealt with. She moved from that point, and they touched on some vocabulary. The vocabulary word that she addressed on today was ad hocery, which is the reliance on temporary situations rather than on consistent long-term plans. And so she talked about how ad hocery in business, how that is applied, and how some rely on short-term aspects rather than long-term aspects. And so every thing that she addressed, I really love, most importantly, how she was able to not only use the business aspect, the classroom term, but she was able to tie real-world learning into every aspect that she addressed. Teacher transitioned into a discussion even on college prep. And so she spoke to one student who was an athlete about when she was a student athlete and the necessity for learning and applying that learning even in the classroom, because college is even considered to be a job when you are a student athlete. And so I believe this teacher had the ability to pinpoint the likes of certain students, the strengths of certain students, and she was able to take something that would interest that particular student and touch on something real world relational in order to get buy-in from that individual student. I think one thing that's so important in teaching and learning is for the educator to be able to touch not only one student, not only some students, but to be able to touch every student in their classroom. Sometimes through a centralized lesson they're able to do that. Other times it takes more individualized approaches to get buy-in from every student. And so even as she was answering questions, she was able to relate the answer of those questions to specific students, to specific things that they like. I think one other thing that's important about her responses to their questions, it showed that she really has a prior knowledge of her students. She knows them individually. She knows what they like, what they dislike. She knows their strengths. She knows their weaknesses. And so even in her discussions, she's able to pinpoint those areas to pour in or either pull out what she needs to in the learning environment.